A big storm hit the small town of Willow Creek. Heavy rain poured down and flooded the streets. The strong current took everything in its path, including people's homes. The water level rose so quickly that no one could react in time. In the midst of this disaster, we meet an adorable golden retriever named Buddy. He lived with his owner, an elderly gentleman named George, who was like a grandfather to him. They were inseparable. But during the chaos of the flood, Buddy got separated from George. The dog ran through the pouring rain, desperately looking for his beloved owner. He barked and howled, but his voice was lost in the roaring of the wind and the sound of the raging floodwater. Buddy ran past houses that were being washed away, over fallen trees that blocked his path, and through debris-filled streets, all while calling out for George. As night fell, the rain began to subside and the wind died down. The storm had passed, but Buddy was still looking for his owner. Exhausted, hungry, and thirsty, he kept going, refusing to give up hope. He didn't know it yet, but his search would lead him on an unexpected journey that would test his loyalty and resilience like never before. He came across a group of volunteers who were helping the flood victims. They saw Buddy, a big, beautiful dog wandering alone, and immediately stopped to pet him. "Where's your owner? Boy, are you lost?" asked one of the volunteers. Buddy licked her hand and whined softly. He didn't understand their words, but he sensed their kindness. The woman stroked his fur and said, "Don't worry, Buddy, we'll help you find your owner." The volunteers gave him some food and water. It wasn't the same as George's cooking, but it was still delicious after he'd gone so long without eating. After resting a bit, Buddy felt renewed and continued his search. The town of Willow Creek looked like a war zone. Homes were destroyed, cars were overturned, and debris was everywhere. But Buddy didn't care about any of that. He only had one goal: find George. Days turned into weeks, but Buddy never gave up hope. He walked tirelessly through the ruined town, refusing to believe that George was really gone. The people of Willow Creek admired Buddy's devotion, and many tried to adopt him, but he turned down all their offers. He missed George too much and wasn't ready to move on. One day, while searching near the river, Buddy came across a group of men who were clearing the debris. One of them was an officer from the local police department. "Hey there, boy," he said to Buddy. "We haven't seen you around these parts before. Are you lost?" Buddy wagged his tail hopefully and barked once. Maybe this man knew George. The officer noticed a tag on Buddy's collar and saw that it had a name and phone number. He dialed the number, but it went straight to voicemail. "Hi there. If you're out there, please leave a message." "Anyone out there?" the officer said into the phone. "I found a dog. He has a tag that says he belongs to you." Then he put the phone down. Buddy looked at the officer with pleading eyes. He hoped that this was the end of his search, that his owner was coming back for him. The officer knelt down and scratched Buddy behind the ears. "Don't worry, Buddy. We'll take good care of you," he said. But Buddy didn't want to be taken care of. He wanted George. They took Buddy to the local animal shelter, which was already full to bursting. There were so many animals that needed help, and the staff were doing their best to care for all of them. But Buddy refused to stay. He wanted to find George. So when the staff weren't looking, he slipped out of his cage and disappeared. Meanwhile, George was going crazy with worry. He'd been searching for Buddy nonstop since he'd lost him in the flood. He'd put up posters, called the vet, and visited every shelter he could think of, but there was no sign of his beloved dog. He was starting to lose hope. One day, George was walking through the park when he heard a familiar bark. He turned around and saw Buddy running towards him. The two hadn't seen each other for what felt like an eternity, and they both rushed towards each other, barking and yelping with joy. It was the happiest day of George's life. He hugged Buddy tightly and whispered, "You're back." "Oh, my boy, I thought I'd never see you again." Buddy licked George's face and wagged his tail so hard that his whole body wiggled. He was just happy to be back with his owner. They played fetch in the park, went for walks in the forest, and cuddled on the couch watching TV. George couldn't believe how lucky he was to have Buddy back. He'd never let anything bad happen to him again. And so they lived happily ever after, or so it seemed. A few months later, another storm hit Willow Creek. The rain poured down in torrents, and the wind howled through the trees. George was getting ready to weather the storm when he noticed that Buddy was missing. He looked out the window and saw Buddy running towards the river. Without thinking twice, George grabbed his coat and ran after him. When he got to the river, he saw that the water was rising fast. "Buddy, come back," he shouted. But the dog just kept running along the riverbank. George didn't understand what Buddy was doing, but he knew he had to follow him. As he ran, he noticed that Buddy was barking furiously at the water. Suddenly, George saw something in the water, and his heart skipped a beat. It was a small boat that was being swept away by the current. Without hesitation, George jumped into the water. The current was strong, but he managed to swim to the boat and grab onto it. With all his strength, he started paddling towards the shore. The water was freezing cold and George was exhausted, but he kept going. He had to get to Buddy. When he finally reached the shore, he collapsed on the ground, shivering and exhausted. But then he saw Buddy running towards him, barking excitedly. The dog had been waiting for George and had called for help. George looked into Buddy's eyes and whispered, "You saved me, boy. I owe you my life." Buddy licked George's face and wagged his tail. He didn't understand what George was saying, but he knew that his owner was safe, and that was all that mattered. The people of Willow Creek cheered when they saw George and Buddy safe on the shore. They had been watching from a distance and were amazed by Buddy's bravery. "That dog is a hero," someone shouted. And everyone agreed. From that day on, Buddy was known throughout Willow Creek as the hero dog. People would stop and pet him whenever they saw him, and he would wag his tail proudly. He had saved his owner's life, and that made him the happiest dog in the world. George was forever grateful to Buddy for saving his life. He knew that he didn't deserve such a brave and loyal dog, but he loved him with all his heart. They continued to go on walks in the park, play fetch, and cuddle on the couch watching TV. And George never took Buddy for granted. Every day with his dog was a gift, and he cherished every moment. They say that dogs are man's best friend, and Buddy proved it. His loyalty and bravery knew no bounds, and he was the most devoted dog anyone could ask for. George was lucky to have Buddy in his life and knew that he was truly blessed.